Thank you, Miranda. I really appreciate your speaking. It was very inspirational for young people. And as a young person, and I think I speak for a lot of young people in society today, I'm actually visiting from the U.S. And a lot of young people in the U.S. are also very disheartened by our political leadership, and we want to see more virtues in our political leadership. Can you speak a little bit to what we can do as young people to bring faith and virtues back into our political leadership here in Australia and around the world?
Well, I think you have enormous power just being young, because everybody wants to know what you think and wants to shape your feelings. So being young is very powerful, because Generation Y particularly is a bit of an enigma to the sort of adult, the establishment adults, the baby boomers who are in power now, because they have this, it's hardwired into their brain, and they cannot see any other paradigm, which is the way they grew up, which was that the old people were the conservatives, stick in the mud, white picket fence, believed in family and stability, and the young people were the radicals and the revolutionaries and so on. So when young people don't behave like that and actually young people are still being radical and revolutionary now, because the establishment is the opposite. So you're still doing what you've always done, but it's just that what you're rebelling against is that sort of anything goes culture that has caused so much damage, that happened, the social revolution again of the 60s and 70s. So I think that you need to young people just need to speak up and also amplify your voices, and you can do that through social media obviously, but it doesn't hurt to, every time you say something, to imbue it with the authority of your generation, and just remind those older than you and those in power that you speak for a lot of people who think like you do, and that things are different, that these people who are in their 50s need to understand that life has changed, and that young people are now wanting different things, and they want to be virtuous, and they want their adults to be virtuous. They don't want their adults to act like teenagers. They want their adults to be mature and responsible and act like grown-ups, which I think is a problem with a lot of the baby boomers, is they're trying to be young and hip all the time. And and then talking about those things, and also furnishing your own morals and your own brain with with a lot of reading of the great writers and understanding a bit more about your own Catholicism, and even the Stoics and Marcus Aurelius and so on. These are the sorts of things that you need to actually sort of sharpen up your own character, because you are going in to do battle. It is a big battle. The world is sort of, this Western culture is set in aspic, and the little fight that I had over that column is just one tiny iota of what needs to be done and what goes on. And every little fight that you have, you change your mind, or you change your heart. You might not even realise that you're doing it at the time, but you do, and those ripple effects go on through generations.
Just to wrap you up.
Hi Miranda, thank you very much for coming and for the work that you do. Can you comment on working in an industry which is hostile to Catholicism, as a lot of industries are, on that balance between straddling the industry, so playing the game long enough that you're actually established enough to have your voice heard, and then actually having your voice heard? But you have such an admirable and long career. At what point did you feel, right, I'm ready to start challenging these people who have given me my job? And what advice can you give us for people working in the media or similar industries?
Well, that's an interesting point. No one has actually asked me before, but when I think about it, even though I'm an opinion columnist, I'm actually in real life quite, mild-mannered. And so I don't pick a fight with people. Unless it's necessary, I'll just keep my opinions pretty much to myself, but try and live in a proper way. But and always when, so in that way I guess I sort of slipped into the position I have now without people realising what a terrible person I really was. But also, look, I think if I'd started life at the Sydney Morning Herald, which is the Guardian of Australia, and a very, a good newspaper with good journalism and so on, good journalists, but it's very left-wing and very hostile to the sorts of things that I've been talking about tonight. So, for the most part, and even though a lot of their readers are, but that's sort of the highbrow journalism end of things. That's the broadsheets all over the world, mostly. You find London, there are a few exceptions, but so I started in Australia at the Daily Telegraph, which was this feisty tabloid, and I was a police reporter, and I was really pretty agnostic when it came to political opinions, and I wasn't writing about politics. So what I learned from being a police reporter and going out to a lot of tragedies, whether it's an earthquake or a flood or a murder, situations where people have suffered terrible loss and terrible grief, and seeing them, seeing the grace and the kind of nobility in the way they handled that, and also feeling that great responsibility that I had to, tell their story in a respectful way. And I remember there was a string of terrible tragedies, bus crashes and all sorts of disasters, and I got kind of survivor fatigue or grief fatigue, and was very upset. And I remember I said to my father, I feel terrible that I'm going and asking these people who are in such dire emotional straits and, intruding on them. And he said, no, well, you're not, because they don't feel like that. And because what you're doing, what you're writing, is you're writing stories that attract the prayers of compassionate strangers. And so from that sort of experience, I think I had sort of had a lifelong, enduring respect for, just regular people, and their goodness, their essential goodness, and their ability to rise above, and to see them in extremists like that. I think doctors in hospices where people are dying see that, it's a real privilege to actually experience humanity at its most tested, and see how marvellous people are when they rise to the challenge, and that there is God in those moments. Probably the closest that you can see that. So that gave me probably a strength and a respect for the reader that I carried through to going to broadsheets, and kept me a little bit immune, I think, from that sort of, cosmopolitan attitude that we, journalists and we powerful people that we mix with are, a special bunch, and that our beliefs and the things we don't believe in are the most important. And then, of course, my Catholic faith as well, which I think in Australia we're not quite as flamboyant about our faith as, say, Americans are. That's just the way we are, and I think it's probably, it's been quite a good thing, but I don't think it hurts to. I think America is sort of unique in that, and I lived and worked there for a long time, in that people, go to Mass and they're quite open, and they're not sort of shy about talking about their faith, and whereas I think Australians have been a bit more reticent, and maybe that should change. I mean, I'm a little reticent about it myself, but and partly that's because of the industry I work in, but I think we could probably all do with speaking a bit more openly about who we are, and about being Catholics, and that probably would inspire other people to see, well, what is it about these people who are Catholics that, they seem sure of themselves in a world where, morality is sort of in a bit of mayhem, that Catholics seem to be modelling these certainties that I would like. So perhaps we should be less reticent.